Good morning. Just to give you a little bit of background, I started in e-commerce about just over 10 years ago. I bought a company called Outdoor 365, which had several brand-specific websites. So one just selling Swiss Army knives, one just selling Leatherman multi-tools. For those that don't know, that's like a large Swiss Army knife with sockets and pliers. We're probably the largest seller of those in the UK. And we still run those sites. They're what I'd call, in Boston Matrix terms, a sort of cash cow. Because they're one brand, we're very dependent on the good relationship with the brand. So there's a limited potential for us to grow those in the same way. And they've done well. So the business was turning over 1 million when we started. Those, what we call the legacy sites, are now doing 3 million. That just, I think, reflects how e-commerce has grown over the last 10 years. And I was looking one day at the sales we're getting, and a lot of the products, like the Leatherman products, are still sort of boys' toys. They're sort of sailors, fishermen, electrician. But the women coming to the website were converting higher. So I thought, well, in some cases, maybe the husband's asked for it as a gift. They can have it personalised. There's a discount. But I thought a lot of people won't because they've not heard of Leatherman. And if they do, it lasts forever. So that was the sort of seed of the idea for the website. Farrar-tanner is any great quality product that can be personalised or engraved. So it has really two strong USPs, I think. One is the brands we work with. So we have over 100 brands, and they tend to be mostly UK or European brands. Some you'll heard of, so we do accessories from Barber. We don't do their jackets, but we do their belts, wallets, handbags, people like Wedgwood. Some you won't have heard of, so from around Europe, people like Monopolis in Greece, who make really nice chess sets and backgammon sets. It's Alfama in Italy. People who do tableware and barware, so L'Atelier, Forge l'Aiguille in France. And they're particularly attractive because when we bring in products from Europe, there's often very little competition, very little price competition in the UK, whereas if you're selling a well-known British brand, we sell Robert Welsh, for instance, but our sales are quite weak because lots of other people are selling them as well. So real differential when we can find a lovely quality product from Europe. I think we sort of hit a really sweet spot that people have sort of moved away from buying plastic stuff from Asia or trying to. So if you are buying something, if you're buying a gift, you want it to be something that's got a bit more sustainability, a bit more sort of brand history and story, handmade in Greece, natural materials, wood and metal, etc. So, and the instinct was right. It did very well. So the first year was sort of year to May 18, it did about 500,000. The next year it did over 1 million. The following year, May 20, it did nearly 2 million. And then you see that big jump, if you can see that graph, that big jump, and that was lockdown, when all my friends were sitting at home, gardening and relaxing. Our turnover more than doubled overnight. So that's obviously sort of quite exciting. But it also then gave some challenges. We obviously had the challenge of scaling up, getting product in, what people were buying was changing. And then the challenge going forward was, how do we maintain and build on that revenue? So if you go back here, you can see the subsequent years, 22, 23, 24. These are the UK domestic sales of the Farrar-tanner website were basically pretty flat. And that reflects that consumers were going back as bricks and mortar stores opened. We also had the challenge that what people were buying in lockdown and post-lockdown changed. So during lockdown, things like kitchen equipment, gardening equipment was flying out as fast as you could get it in stock. We also need to scale up facilities. But the big challenge, what could we do to keep growing the business in an economy that was sort of reverting back to sort of trend, people going back into store. And so we decided to really look at international seriously. We'd done some incidental international stuff, sending it out by Royal Mail, DPD, whatever, but we'd never really focused it as a sort of key, is this not working? As a sort of key strategic thing. So we started saying, okay, what are the requirements to be able to sell effectively on an international market? So for those of you that are sitting at the front, you can probably see it better than those at the back of the room, but so we wanted sort of IP geolocation so that we could identify where the system, the website could identify where the customer was, what country they're in. We wanted at least some local language and certainly local messaging. So if someone, say, comes from the States, you want to be able to say, yeah, no worries, we can ship to the States. All the duties are included in the price you see. So we wanted calculation of VAT and duties to be seamless and transparent for the customers. We wanted flexible pricing for different markets. So to be able to sort of uplift the price, so in some cases to cover duty, in other cases, I don't know really, but we also wanted local payment options, international shipping partners. VAT and duty reporting is obviously a concern. You've got dozens of different countries. Potentially you could be doing dozens of different reports on a monthly, quarterly basis. And then international marketing. So those were the sort of some of the requirements were identified, and it's quite daunting. And it's a daunting to think about making that sort of investment when you've got no traffic internationally. You're thinking, okay, how much could this be? You can't afford just to say, okay, let's spend 100,000 on consultants and staff and systems. So really there were sort of three options I think we sort of looked at. One is you could sort of build it yourself effectively. So Avalara provide tax calculation services. So for instance, they have a platform that helps you work out the VAT and duties in the different countries and helps automate the reporting of that. International shipping, there's international shipping partners you can find. We use Adyen Payments in the UK, who are an excellent payment provider and are actually the payment provider that Globally use for most of their markets anyway. And then you could do things like have a sort of pop-ups to give local messaging saying, yes, we ship to your country, etc., etc. But as I say, to actually try and do that all yourself, it's quite daunting. You're going to have to make everything work together. You're going to have the integrated systems. You're going to have to think of the things that I've not thought about here. So Globally was, and probably sort of is, the front runner. They're a relatively new business. I know sort of 10 years ago they were sort of very much in startup mode. They're now a multi-billion-pound business, and they provide a complete turnkey service. The other name that we sort of have looked at times is Glopal. Glopal starts off in France, I believe, and I think initially we're providing a service just for Amazon or eBay or some whatever, but they've actually now got quite a comprehensive offering. Where they're different from Globally is they tend to be a bit more modular. So Globally, you sort of pay one fee, you get all the services. Glopal, you can sort of choose the different services. So you can say, okay, I want to buy the translation service, I want to buy the duties and taxes, I want to buy assistance on international marketing. So, and Glopal, when we first looked at them, were quite weak in their consumer offering in the UK. I think they've strengthened a lot in the last 2 or 3 years, and I think their offering looks so quite credible. I think for some markets they can be cheaper than globally. Others, if you're using all the services, including, say, translation into foreign languages, they probably can be more expensive, but you maybe gain more service. But at the time, a few years ago, globally was the front runner. And so we decided to go globally. So what did that give us? That allowed us flexible and transparent pricing on the site. It meant we only had to have one international site, and with different currencies and price uplift by country, sort of driven by the geolocation. You don't necessarily need to have a separate site, but we decided it made sense. I think for two principal reasons, three reasons. One is you want the messaging is very different. So where on the UK site you're talking about next day delivery, for instance. On the international site you're talking about, yes, we do ship to America and it's free if it's over $100. So the whole messaging is very different. The other reason is we have some products. So for instance, we sell wine in an engraved wooden gift box that you can't, or it's difficult to export. You know, you're going to have different regulations on selling wines in different countries. So we had some products where, for legislative reasons, we didn't want to sell them. And then also, we had some products where they're low value but bulky. So let's say a wooden gardening trug. You know, you sell it for £30, and then you're going to get hit by volumetric pricing. You're going to get charged £100 shipping. So it really doesn't make sense to offer a product like that for sale in a foreign market. So for that reason, we had one instance on Magento for the international stores. And one of the really attractive things about Globally is they become the merchant of record. So legally, I'm here under false pretenses. We don't export anything. At the final point of sale in the checkout, legally the sale transfers to Globally. And what that means is they're then responsible in practice and legally for complying with all the tax and duty requirements and reporting worldwide, and we don't have to think about it at all. So for small business or for business starting off in the international, that's a huge potential headache taken away. They also provide local payment options and shipping partners. It's not all fantastic, not all been fantastic. So all of these services cost money. Globally, typically charge 7.5%. We've sort of got them down, unofficially we got them down to about 6.5% now. They also charge 2.95% on the currency fee, which is a bit sneaky. They say I'm the only person that's ever challenged the level of that fee, and they kindly reduced it to 2.45% for us. That fee, 7.5, and the currency fee, that does include the banking transaction fee, the sort of credit card fees. You also get some reduced control of sort of customer service and where there are issues. I mean, there's a sort of platform. You've got some. I would have to talk to my customer service staff, but you have some control, but some of it's also done by Globally. So you've got a reduced sort of level of customer service potentially. The reporting is quite tricky. So apart from the Farrar-tanner website, which is where most of our exports take place, we do export a little bit, particularly to Ireland on the other sites. So we have 5 websites. Their reporting and invoicing is weekly. So in practice, to try and monitor that and reconcile that is sort of quite awkward and clumsy. And they currently don't support full language translation. So they'll have a pop-up in the person's local language. They'll have the checkout in local language. They're not currently translating the website, although believe they're sort of beta testing that. So particularly I think for Europe, I would say our sales are relatively poor because, you know, you've got to be comfortable with an English website or using Google Translate if you're in France, Germany, what have you. But so, you know, did it work? So here's that same graph, but the bit in red is the international. So we probably had 2 months in May 22. We had a little amount there, which is hard to read what it is on this chart. But then by the second year, so the red is the international sales. So in the first full year, effectively May 23, we did just over 2 million of sales, and the following year we did 2.5 million of sales. So while the journey with Globally wasn't perfect, it allowed us to scale up those international sales really quite painlessly, and, you know, to be able to have done that, setting it up ourselves, setting up Avalara, setting up the websites and all the sort of associated things ourselves, I don't think we could have achieved that level of sales that quickly and that seamlessly. So it was very practical and effective, I think. So just talk a little bit about some sort of pricing elements and some marketing that we've sort of done as we've sort of gone international. So as I mentioned before, we sort of uplift the prices by country to subsidise the duties, and also we subsidise to pay for the Globally fees. So a lot of retailers take the Globally fees, if you like, below the line. They take it as a cost. We mark up the prices, and in particular, if you've got a product that's selling in the UK, let's say for £120, which is £100 plus £20 VAT, and we're sending it, say, to the States, we'll still charge it for £120. So straight away, we've got that £20 to pay for any duties and costs. And then recently, I upped US prices by 5% and then 15% because Trump's messing around with the tariffs. But yeah, so a lot of companies might take the Globally fee as a cost post to a product sale. We look to build it in so that we're still making the same margin on the products being sold internationally as we would in the UK. The other thing we do is we uplift the product prices by weight. So we weigh the item. If it's a backgammon set, let's say, that weighs 4 kilos, we add on £4 per kilo. So we'll add on like £16 to the base UK price. And we use that to subsidise shipping. So if a customer comes from the States, they would rather see a slightly more expensive backgammon set. So they'd rather see a backgammon set that costs $220 than $200, but then find they're being hit with $30 postage in the checkout. So to keep the postage cheap, like $10 or free over a certain amount, we uplift the cost depending on the weight of the product. And again, this is something we can do because we've got a separate website for the international sales. So marketing, we've sort of done a few things. We've done a bit of PPC, we've done a bit of Facebook, Microsoft PPC. Those are relatively small. The main paid channel we've used is PMax adverts. So we've now built feeds for about 30 different countries. It generally, I would say, it sort of works quite well. I mean, you don't have huge control of PMax. It's just everything's in one pot, and it's a bit of a black box with Google, so you can't manage it always very specifically. In the UK, we have sort of about 5 different feeds depending on the margin of the product. If it's a slow selling product, For the international, we don't, because otherwise we'd have 150 feeds rather than 30 feeds. And again, it's been tough at times, so particularly last year. So the feeds update each night with the sort of updated pricing from Globally. Towards the end of last year, that stopped working effectively. It was taking several hours to sort of update the feed, and it was frequently crashing, leading to products not being shown, poor performance, poor sales. Rob, my tech genius, he sort of built our own engine, and it's now working really effectively. So PMax is definitely a good marketing approach, I think. For other people, I think, Facebook, whatever, PPC might work for other people, stuff like YouTube. We're just generally not so good at that. We've always been quite strong on Google in the UK as well, probably over-reliant on Google. So PMax has been a very natural fit for us. But I'm sure a lot of you guys are much smarter at marketing and could do more on other channels as well. But yeah, all of these things, you've got to just, particularly on PMax, you've got to be looking at the quality of the feed, making sure it's working effectively. And it took us a few weeks just to even notice that it wasn't. So where do we go from here? So I've just been thinking about, some of the questions we've been asking ourselves. We're now doing sort of 2.5 million internationally. It's all working well up to a point. We are paying quite a lot of money to Globally. We're paying over 150,000 in fees. If you include the commission on the currency, it's probably over 200,000. So it's quite a big bucket of money that we could say, is it best being spent with Globally or not? One thing we're looking at with the depending how the tariff situation in the States works, is we might set up a separate website for the US rather than the rest of the international anyway, just to have different pricing to pick up different tariffs from different product countries. Sorry, it should be Glopal, not global. Glopal, I think is worth reviewing. We've looked at that in the past. Their product offering gets stronger and stronger. In particular, they're quite strong on translation, and they claim to offer enhanced SEO off the page optimization, which is something that sounds great if I knew what it meant. And then some of the markets, particularly if you've got a relatively simple market, let's say Australia, where the duty is a flat 10% on everything, and they speak something approximating to English, then you could say, well, should we have a website just for Australia? And do we need a Globally or Glopal, or can we just do it directly ourselves and save some of that cost? So, you then have to register with Australia, but then it'd be tracking the sales and just doing whatever they require quarterly, or you'd probably then use someone like Avalara, who would be charging maybe 1.5%. We'd be using Adyen for payments, who would be charging 1-2%, depending on the payment method. So you still have some costs, but reduced cost. And then the other question is, would you be losing functionality that would have an impact on the sales? And my instinct is, for something like Australia, that'd be worth doing. When you speak to Globally, they come back with a very convincing argument of all the added benefits they bring and why you'd be worse off if you didn't use them throughout. So I don't have the answer. So anyone who's coming today for any answers, it's all just doing what works for us. And going on the slide. And then European markets, Glopal again, so it should be with a P. With their language capabilities, and in Europe you can have one consolidated VAT return. So if you use someone like Avalara, If we wanted to sort of increase sales in Europe, then having decent foreign language translation or websites would certainly be a next stage to consider looking at. Thank you.